Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat, and with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is likened to a man which sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat, and went his way. But when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, didst not thou sow good seed in thy field? From whence then hath it tares? He said unto them, An enemy hath done this. The servants said unto him, Wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? But he said, Nay, lest while ye gather up the tares, ye root up also the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And in the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, Gather ye together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen, and I have as co-host with me this evening, Kathy Dunson. Kathy, are you there, sister?
I am. Good evening, everybody.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining me. Just wanted to let everybody know that Kathy's gonna take it over from here, and I'm just gonna I'm just gonna ride shotgun and comment here and there.
Okay,
um,
that's fine.
I'm teasing. Um, but how are you doing? Everything's good. You're feeling good, and life is good, and
Yeah,
good.
it's just it gets overwhelming at
Yes.
times.
Mm,
The things that we do and follow and pay attention to, and I really try and stay aware to share things and that like you talked about the Sacred Word Publishing last week, and I want to listen to that show. I've downloaded it to listen to tomorrow. I try and incorporate things to listen to and learn from while I do other tasks. It's just so much. There's such a
mm-hmm.
wealth of stuff. And then everything that's going on in the world right now. So anyway, I was kind of overwhelmed last week and I just kind of shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to avoid that.
That it's necessary, and I did the same thing when I first came to awakening, and back then it was all the focus on, 9/11, government-sponsored terror, and learning about how you can't trust doctors or government or anybody, even your teachers and educators, and our parents and grandparents, everybody basically taught us lies just because they were indoctrinated into the same matrix and same belief system. And so just learning that everything was based upon deception, I mean, it's a heavy thing. And then trying to filter and discern, because you're really having to reestablish and build up a paradigm and replace the old belief systems. And that is a heavy task. I mean, having to um, substitute all you thought you knew of truth with new information and to assimilate all that and then throw, you know, on top of that, the New World Order, the Illuminati, and the seed of Cain working from the shadows to perpetuate the New World Order and world government, the collapse of the financial system, and all of that, and how it all aligns with biblical prophecy. All that is just so heavy. So I had to learn, a long time ago to basically balance it and to learn to um, do things that I love to do, which brought me joy, but also would ease some of the heaviness and balance it with light, balance
L-
the darkness with light.
Let me ask you, what was it initially that woke you up to, the world was not what you had believed and been taught?
Well, when I began to examine the 9/11, because it had a very deeply profound effect on me. I remember wakening the morning, and in my third book, A Different Way of Being, there's a whole series of poems which speak about this. Because at that time I was a columnist and I wrote for magazines, and so I wrote like, usually I wrote like 2,000 to 3,500 words, and I ended up writing like several, like 13,000, and they broke it up into different sections and published it all. But in writing all of that and just recognizing that the world has changed and that we could never go back to, the way things were before the events of that day, and then investigating it, wanting to know more, and wanting to learn as much as I could about that event, because that was the turning point for our generation, as far as the the instituting the Patriot Act, the
Yeah.
war of and on terror, and then the wars of in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places, and the indiscriminate bombing and of peoples, as far as things like the drones and assassinations and all that. I mean, they basically took the gloves off. Then we got involved in torture, the loss of habeas corpus rights, the whole military tribunal system as an alternate justice system, and then the thing with being able to label an American citizen. If you just put the domestic terrorist label on them, you can then torture them, hold them indefinitely, no right to jury, no right to a speedy trial, none of that. And so, in studying and looking to all of that, then I was basically led to understand that 9/11 was an inside job, and that there was an aspect to it that was not being conveyed truthfully on the mainstream media. And then also learning that basically the mainstream media was just another arm of the same shadowy um, government and figures that had perpetuated the events of that day. Just all of that, led me to more and more and more, and just going further and further down the rabbit hole, and then one thing after the other, after the other, after the other, and I was already involved with the study of scripture and writing about the seed of Cain, the fallen angels, and the giants. But that event brought the whole world to conspiracy and the whole clandestine black ops, and what they're doing behind the scenes, as far as the New World Order, how it all connects with the central banking, the Federal Reserve System, the deficit spending, all of that. It For me, it merged my biblical
Exactly.
and prophetic
Yeah.
side with the conspiratorial
Yeah, I think
side.
that's really important. People, Christians, most Christians today, excuse me, the mainstream church, they won't look at that. Most of them are just oblivious to it. but it makes such sense when you think about Satan. I mean, wouldn't you expect that he would be behind such evil that really has been the launch pad to ramp up, all of these last days events that
Right.
began, like you say, with the fig tree generation. I'm not sure exactly when you time that, but we are that last generation. And so, what a perfect, I mean, it just makes so much sense. I know myself, I was really reluctant to look at that. And I noticed because John Baptist on the Tribulation Now, he had a 9/11 thing on his website. It was just, I was learning so many other things, but I kept, like saying, no, I don't want to look at that. I don't want,
Mm-hmm.
I know it's going to be true with everything else I'm learning. But then, I finally did. And lately, it's been interesting to me to analyze what my mindset was during that decade when, Bush and all that. I was completely buying into what the Fox News, you know, um, manipulation in the media was. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this is how you think of it. This isn't how you think of it. I remember thinking, I think I saw small change or loose change being promoted on one of the left wing sites. So because it was being promoted by left wing, that's where I put it in that bucket. And it's
Mm-hmm.
it's really a subconscious thing that we do. But I thought Rumsfeld was good. I thought George W. was good. You get in that, and I see that in others, who I know, that that's what they do. Is what I used to do. But now, seeing what's happening in Syria and the sources that I use, that really go in and tear it apart, and then you see it confirmed, like the propaganda that the Pentagon admitted to just in the last week. $500 million that we paid to for ISIS propaganda. And I saw one of my I'm not going to mention her. I love her to death. A conservative, Islamic focused websites taking that story and spinning it. I mean, having the actual story, but spinning it in favor of the US. I was appalled at
Mm-hmm.
that. But that's where I was. And now, I've learned that, we got to get to the truth of these things. And bottom line, at that point in time, I mean, that's where it's coming from. It's coming from the adversary, and it's for a purpose. And you can see all of these things that come forth out of it. The thing that woke me up to really start doing things different and looking at things different was the financial collapse in 2008. It's probably because of
Mm-hmm.
my background as
Right.
an accountant and tax preparer, and knowing all of that is just so useless. And I remember thinking back, I had someone I caught up his taxes eons ago. He was a tax protester, and thinking, oh, you're just silly, but not looking into what he did.
Right.
And now, I learned unconstitutional,
Right.
it's
Yes.
slavery. I
Mm-hmm.
tried to explain that, to someone the other day, and just, like water off a duck,
Right.
not gonna take it in. And that's, where I was in so many things. But that event got me thinking that, no, this isn't right. And so then I really started to open up. So it's any one of, you know, a multitude, a multiple of events that can wake someone up. And that's why, I think that we on Facebook and places that we try and share information, I try and share just all kinds of stuff, because you never know when you're going to get through. And at the bottom of all of these, it's Satan.
Right. And you never know what's going to be the catalyst for a certain individual as to bringing them, the domino that knocks down all the other dominoes and that brings them to full understanding. And so, yeah, that's all we can do is plant seeds. But I just want to give a shout out to Dharma and Piney and Beeblebrox and Link and Pale Rider, Mr. Rowe. Kathy's with me, Simply Tribal, um, and all the rest of you, Frienda, Flat Earth Kitty. that are all Monster, Zippy, Zipster, Seajoy, everybody that's in the chat room. Know that we appreciate all of you, Mitchell, Cher, and everybody else that's not in the immediate scroll. And thank you, Piney, for your commentary as far as the different endeavors that we're involved in and all that we've got going on. There's a lot of things, and I'm so excited about all of them and being able to do what we're going to be able to do. As far as those of you that missed if you missed the last show where I talked about um, Sacred Word Publishing and also the nonprofit that we will have married to it, Endeavor Freedom, which will be through that nonprofit able to do the real work. I mean, not that, sharing information and sharing truth and helping others to awaken isn't the real work, but I know all of us in our heart, we want to directly help as far as feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, taking care of the homeless, the orphan, the widowed, battered mothers, veterans. That's where, if all of us could, to be able to help out and to be directly involved with sharing charity and kindness and compassion, that most certainly all of us would want to do that with our time and efforts. And so for us to be able to do that, and to also be able to provide the tax write-offs to those of you that have the ability to donate, and just not wanting, to have your money go to government, but to go to a good cause. To be able to provide that is just a huge thing, and to be able, like I said, to tie that into our efforts with Sacred Word Publishing is just so awesome, and I'm so very grateful. And also know that the websites are being set up now, and somebody's working on all that, and so we'll let you know. And then also, being directly involved with one of my friends who has a nonprofit where she and her girlfriends go down to Atlanta every Sunday and deliver directly to the homeless the things that they need. We are buying Bibles for them to be able to pass out and share, with them down there, as well as whatever it is, bottled water, food, clothes, socks, underwear. Those are things that they're often requested. But whatever it is, to be able to give directly to those that really need it. And then the other thing about what we're doing is that it's completely voluntary. There's nobody that gets paid through the nonprofit. It's completely whatever you donate to any one of these causes, 100% of that money will go directly to those particular groups that we're going to be, helping, and focused on doing what we can to raise money for them. I'll just be redirecting the funds to them directly and giving to those groups that are working in also in voluntary capacity, like the people that go down on Sunday, their nonprofit, nobody gets paid there either. 100% of the money goes directly to helping the homeless, and so those are the kind of things we want to support, rather than all these huge corporate, nonprofit corporations that have all these people on the payroll, and that most of the money goes to fund the administration rather than actually, making it to the people on the ground. And so
And how do people donate?
right now, you can go to Fallen Angels TV. There's a donate button. You can also click, there's a line to declare which group it is that you want to support, whether it's the homeless or the veterans, or we're even involved in helping an orphanage in Kenya. with a Pastor William Wakesa Wasiki, send them money directly to, and they run an orphanage there in Kenya. And then also people with disabilities, people that are in nursing homes, um, those that are trying to transition and stay in the community or get out of nursing homes, those are all the kind of things that we're doing. And this is why we call this nonprofit Endeavor Freedom, which, those of you that follow my work on YouTube, that is also the name of my YouTube channel. And so um, I will be restructuring the website at endeavorfreedom.org, which is the domain name that will be connected to our nonprofit. And then Sacred Word Publishing, also, when we get all that set up, there will be a link to that as well. But for those of you, and I know that the Fallen Angels TV, the website, has been getting attacked a lot, and that they've been knocking it offline. And so if you're not able to get there, you can PayPal directly, general, GENERAL, at endeavorfreedom.org. ENDEAVOR, freedom, FREEDOM.org. And just tell us in the description of your donation which group of people you want the money to go to. And as I said, 100% of that money will go to them. And also, those of you that would like, just request that we send you a letter, as far as your donation amount, and then you can write it 100% off of your taxes. Because we are a 501c3. Our number is 75 298 4665. And Endeavor Freedom as a nonprofit has been in existence since 2001.
I did want to mention, because I know we've talked about it, the banner, the portal to go to Amazon, that
Oh,
does
yes, right.
give some benefit. I'm not sure how you direct that totally, but people who use Amazon, I know I'm a big fan of Amazon.
I am
Uh,
too.
yeah, well, I like that it keeps a record of everything. Well, it's nice to be able to go back. But if you click on the banner through fallenangels.tv, then there's a percentage of your purchase that comes back.
Right, and helps us. And this is all set up on the fallenangels.tv website as well. At the very top, you will see in the banner a link to 4 of my books that when you click on it, it takes you to Amazon. Well, those of you that would like to support us without having to donate anything directly, if you are a shopper and a patron of Amazon.com, of course you have to have your ad block off, and you have to allow the website to load up the ads at the top of the website, the web page. But if you click on one of those book links, it'll take you to Amazon, and whatever you spend there, we will get a portion of your proceeds, depending on what it is you buy, anywhere from 4 to 12%. And so, that's one way that you can support us in our efforts.
And
And
that doesn't cost anything.
yeah, it doesn't cost anything, and that we appreciate you. And also just um, watching our videos on the different YouTube pages, both at Endeavor Freedom and Zen Garcia, which those are the two YouTube websites that also helps us as well, for those of you that click through the ads and allow them to run, because I know a lot of people have ad block on YouTube as well. But those of you that don't, that it does greatly benefit us, and that's something that you can do freely as well. And, basically, we're providing all of that information free of charge, and just trying to help you to awaken. And so, in doing that, allowing the videos to play, that it does help us slightly, but it does add up. And so we appreciate you as well. And also, please go and support Kathy on her YouTube channel as well. I believe it's Tribulation Dash Now. Is that right, Kathy?
It's just tribulation now.
Okay, Tribulation Now, no dash. Yes. And so those are some ways that you can help us. But as I said, I'm really excited to, through the Sacred Word Publishing, which Kathy wasn't able to join me last week. But after she hears the show, she'll know about all the things that we're going to be
Oh boy.
putting forth effort to do. And and we want to help all of you as well, to those of you that have had interest in publishing books, or in doing different projects, to actually be able to put that together, even if it's a workbook, or like just recently was contacted by a lady that wants to do a devotional, one of those 365-day devotionals. And we spoke, and another gentleman, there's several book projects that I have pending. I'm going to be helping others to produce, and that also will help us to support these Endeavor Freedom projects as well, and also to help us to get the means and the tools to be able to do other things, like Kathy and Ann, to the ladies that are helping me with the Sacred Word Publishing. They are in the process of learning how to do the audiobooks, which is something that would be, greatly beneficial to us as a company, a publishing company, to be able to do that and to provide that service, for those of you that also might be interested. And so there's different things, and then my efforts, and knowledge in just putting together books really fast, and having developed that skill over, well, I published my first book in 1992 when I was 22 years old, and I'm 46 now. So that's a lot of years, 22 years of publishing, and 10 books in now. And oh, and also just an update for Lucifer, Father of Cain, which, well, we'll be right back, everyone. Oh, sorry, everybody. I was um I was muted, and so I apologize. Anyways, let me just catch you up on what I was saying. I wanted to also just let you know that we are in the process, both myself and Kathy, of learning how to turn and convert my books into audiobooks, and that many of you, thank you, Kathy, that many of you have requested me to do that, which I just have not had the time, just because I'm writing and putting books out on new and information and new revelations that the Most High is leading me to discovery of. And, I'm still 3 books behind as it is right now. But in the process of reading over and also fixing some of the material for conversion into audio, I have had the opportunity to rewrite, and to reconsider the material. And so I have completed my last 2 books, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, and The Firmament, Vaulted Dome of the Earth. And so those are 2 that we will be working on. And then I'm also working on Lucifer, Father of Cain. I'm rewriting it right now, and I'm about 4 chapters away from completing that process. But what I have discovered in doing this, because many of you that are familiar with my work, that I had a whole other book that I was going to publish completely dedicated to that as topic. And I was basically going to name it something like Lucifer, Father of Cain, number 2, or Serpent Seeds Connection to New World Order Bloodlines, something of that. Something of that nature. But I decided to go ahead in performing this rewrite, and also in doing this converting it to audiobook to compile some of this new information and to include it into the context of this manuscript. But having done so has pushed the page count to well over now 500 something pages, which of course I'm there, I cannot publish a book 500 pages long. 400 is pushing it and is scary for a lot of people that don't even like to read. And so I decided I'm going to split it up into three main components, which I cover in the fullness of that book. And so I'm going to present it in three themes. One, the war in heaven, because for those that have read that book, the first portion of the book is dedicated to that, to explaining that, as well as the antediluvian age and how it all ties together. Because the war in heaven is the foundation, the separation of light and darkness. It's the foundation for what becomes the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, and the great contest between the children of Adam and the children of Cain, which are, the children of Yeshua, as it says in Matthew 13, and the children of Satan. And so this is the great contest, and this battle, this, which I read the quote from Matthew 13 to open the show, um, this second world age and what is will be the second book of this three topic, and these three divisions. The second one will be speaking about the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent as the second stage for the ongoing war in heaven. And then the third will be focused on Moses leading the people Israel into, um, basically outside of the promised land, and then the giants, the war against the giants. And so that will be the theme of the third book. Um, and so in writing all of these, I've expanded it in great detail. And the other thing that I've noticed is that the last two books that I published in 14-point font, which makes it a whole lot easier for me to work with and a whole lot easier for my listeners, I mean, my viewers and readers, to read the text. And I know that a lot of you that are older like myself, that you appreciate me having done so. And like I said, it's less strain on the eyes to read it when it's larger like that. And I find that it's less tiresome as well. And so I decided, that in republishing these three themes in three different books, that I'm also going to do it in 14-point font as well, which, as I mentioned, I'm already, as far as page count, up towards 500 pages, and that's all 12-point font. And so when I convert it, it's going to make it probably 700 pages. And so it will be plenty of material to fill in the fullness of these three themes as I've laid them out to you. But, anyways, what do you think about that, Kathy?
Oh, I think it's brilliant, and I think they work well in the hardcover books.
Yes, right.
Yeah, so I really enjoy them in that way, and it's not just because I'm old.
Right, right. Yeah, well,
And
good.
I like how you're breaking those apart as well. I think I know in the Firmament book you revisited a lot of that war in heaven, and
Right,
I think for people who are not familiar with your other books, and I think there's a new audience for your work
right.
with these the discoveries, the Firmament and Flat Earth Book of Enoch. So that does open up, all of that information to them as well. So I like the way that you're breaking this up.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Because yes, the people that are being exposed to my work now are so numerous. And you're right, my last two books are bringing an entirely new audience to the discovery of my work and to consideration of it. Because even though I write about a lot of unpopular themes, which, I don't know why they're unpopular, but
Yeah,
for whatever reason they are. I mean, truth is truth to me, uh,
absolutely. It
yeah.
is. It's mind-boggling. But at any rate, it is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. But whatever, as far as some of the themes that I write about, they're not very well received. But the people that understand that I'm just basically, in whatever I write about, I present the material in the same manner. I give you all the evidence and allow you to decide for yourself whether that topic is Cain being the son of the devil, or whether it's pre-existence, or the New World Order, or giants and Nephilim, or whatever. I present you with the fullness of the material. I lay it out from Scripture, the foundation of the canon, firstly and foremost, and then I give you all of the other extra biblical material, which most people are not familiar with or aware of, and they'll allow you to decide for yourself, and then to take that discernment and all those teachings to the Most High God and ask Him for confirmation as to whether it is true or not. And so, a lot of people that are discovering my work now, they realize that even though some of the topics I cover and talk about and expound upon are not popular as far as with mainstream churchianity or Christianity, or even the so-called, alternative thought leaders. Um, my approach to each one of those topics is in the same way, in the same manner, as I just laid out. And so they are opening themselves to reconsider their stance on this subject matter, just because they know that what I write about in at least the last two books, as far as the flat Earth and the firmament book, that um, that they have had to open themselves to all of that new information, because it in no way contradicts the foundation of the Bible, but actually affirms the veracity of it and just helps to explicate it in greater detail. Like with the firmament book, I use so much material and source references that most people are not familiar with. Um, but again, it helps you to understand it better. Go ahead.
In the firmament book you explained like a forensic investigation. You were bringing together all of these disparate texts and comparing and contrasting for people to see on their own. You're not withholding anything, and you've pulled it all together. You're not making a judgment on divinity or anything of that nature. What you're doing is showing, look, this exists, and it confirms one another. So it brings people to a point to think, what does this mean? And then you bring it to Scripture and say, this is where it is in Scripture. So there, I think people often are thinking that you're saying that, this is um, the word of God, or and that's not the case at all. So I mean, thinking of it as a forensic investigation, which you do actually go into that in one of the chapters in this
Yes.
book, and I thought that was a wonderful explanation of it.
Right. And that's the way I approach, in the study of any aspect of truth. I approach it as a criminologist would in trying to solve a crime. In gathering all of the material, even those pieces of evidence which seemingly are meaningless or worthless, or that seem to not be connected to the topic of in introspection and investigation, that oftentimes what you may have believed to not be uh, actually connected or as worthless piece of evidence, that sometimes that ends up being the key to unlocking a huge part of what is revelation. And so yeah, I thought I would present it that way just because, I'm so greatly criticized and just harassed and labeled as a heretic for just studying all of the material that is out there, and in reading all of the ancient texts. It's like earlier today I was listening to a particular show, and they were talking about uh, the definition for apocalypse and how it it means basically uh, unveiling or bringing forth to light. And the apocalypse, everybody believes that that is just, basically the end of days and the judgment and the wrath of God that is going to be coming down the line and being poured out on us, which is, with our being the final generation. But it actually means all this knowledge coming to light, and that at the end of days, this is exactly what is happening. That the Most High, Yeshua, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit are moving and pouring the Spirit out on all flesh. And so, all these books that had been hidden, like especially with the Nag Hammadi codices and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and people criticize them and judge them, and yet, these are collections that were preserved by the Most High God, and we didn't even get the fullness of them. The elites and those that discovered them have kept certain portions of them from us, as they always do, because they've been hiding truth. And that's the weird thing as well, is how everybody thinks that all these books are meaningless or worthless or gnostic, as some people have
Right.
yeah.
If they would just look at the meanings of words, and
Right.
gnosis is just knowledge. But I think
Exactly.
we've been conditioned in this time to look askance at these things without understanding. And
Yes.
that's because in the past, like you said, they withheld it. It wasn't given to the masses.
Right.
Now it's all available. Now it's like the term conspiracy theorist. It's
Uh-huh. Right.
something you don't want to be. And,
Yes.
you don't want to look at a Gnostic text.
Right. Right.
It's words, it's a book.
Right.
It's like Josephus, like anything else. It's a book.
Yes.
And I see people that also talk against looking at commentaries, or I'll just look at my Bible. Well, of course,
Right.
but there's there's so many books out there. So I it's a
Yes.
wonder to me. I learned so much now just looking at the meanings of words.
Yes, exactly. And like as you said, the historical context, like individuals like Philo and Josephus, and recently the two books that I discovered, Louis Ginsburg on the legends of the Jews, and Johann Eisenmenger on the traditions of the Jews. These two books are fascinating and jam packed with information, which we're going to go into here in just a short bit. Um, but yeah, after this next break, I'll actually start to read from some of that, and I'll get Kathy to comment on it. But anyways, I wanted to also say that, historically, over time, the children of Cain, the children of the devil, they have been hiding, destroying truth, and trying um, to to destroy it, and to change it, alter it, and to make certain portions of it disappear in order to hide their presence and what they're doing, and that they are here with us. In my opinion, that's why the whole thing with the children of Cain, and what had happened in the garden is so secretive and has is little understood, is because they have hidden their own presence, and who they are, and that they have been warring against the seed of Adam since beginning of the enmity, which for the, another question that people always ask me is, well, isn't Genesis 3 really about Genesis 6? And I'm like, well, if the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, if it's written in Genesis 3:15, wouldn't it be connected to Genesis chapter 3? Why would God put it in Genesis chapter 3 if it's about Genesis chapter 6? It doesn't make sense. And so in my opinion, in the way that I teach it, Genesis chapter 6, as far as the sons of God mating with the daughters of Cain and taking wives of all which they chose and then creating a hybrid race of giants, that wouldn't even be possible if the the hybridization wasn't first brought through the children of Cain, in my opinion. And so that's why we see in Genesis chapter 3 where that's where the beguilement of Eve occurs, her temptation and her seduction. And that's also where we see the foundation for the conception of the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman, and how that leads to Genesis chapter 4, which is the chapter dedicated to the line of Cain, and the description of the first 10 generations of Cain. And then Genesis chapter 5, which is about the children of Adam through Seth, because Abel was killed by his half brother. And in understanding that, that's what then leads to Genesis 6. And so there's a reason, and it's not just, as I mentioned, everything written that is brought and laid out in arrangement in scripture, there is meaning behind it. There's no mistakes. Go ahead, Kathy.
Which name is it that I have acquired a son?
Oh, yeah, that's Cain.
Yeah, I find it interesting that so many people, Christians these days, who are looking at the meanings of words, of names throughout the Old Testament and into the New Testament. Chuck Missler is one. They don't look at that. I mean, why is that?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And which it
So,
makes
like,
sense if you understand that Cain was Adam's stepson, and he acquired him when he took Eve to his as his wife, and then Abel, meaning breath, is a representation of Adam, who was the breath of life that was blown into his body, his dust, physical form. And then when you see that Seth, his name means substitute, and that he was the substitute for Abel. And it says specifically in the book of Jubilees that, Seth was the second son of Adam and Eve, which is something we're going to go into when we return to break. But yeah, it's going to be mind blowing, some of the information that I'm going to share with you that I read on a show that I did with John and David Carrico about the city of Enoch and the mark of Cain and all of that. So I thought it would be interesting for me to share some of that again here with this listening audience. And so we'll do that when we return back from the break. But give you a chance for final comment,
oh,
Kathy.
I'm just looking forward to it. I didn't get to listen to that whole show. I fell asleep.
Oh, yeah. Okay, right on. Well, then this information will be new for you as well, and
These shows are so late.
oh, I know, and it was 3 hours. We ended up staying. I was up till 2 in the morning doing that show, which kind of ruins me for the next day. But luckily, I don't have to get up and go to work. I can basically get up and start doing what I do. All right, we'll be right back, everyone. Welcome back, everybody. I want to answer a question from Piney in the chat room. I thought this was interesting, and it lines up with some of the things that I've been talking about of late, especially with the War in Heaven, the show that I did as far as the War in Heaven with John and David Carrico over there on Now You See TV, where I laid out, basically how it led to the antediluvian age and the destruction of what was the first Earth. But anyways, Piney asked, do you think this reference to Lucifer as morning star has anything to do with the elites being obsessed with the sun? They put it in many of their corporate logos, movies, and such. And it's a really good question. But as far as the morning star has more to do with Venus. And the reason the morning star, the reason Venus has association with the morning star is because often you will see Venus in association with the dawn and also with dusk, and that she will be visible right before sunrise and also right before or after sunset. And um and so she has association to twilight. And the reason why Lucifer is calls himself the morning star and has assumed that title is because if you study in Revelation, Yeshua is the original morning star. And the reason Yeshua is called the original morning star is not because of association with Venus. The reason Yeshua is called the original morning star is because he is the light that was called forth before the heavenly luminaries were even called into being on the fourth day. And as I explained this in that particular show, and as I cover it in Lucifer, Father of Cain, and also in what will be the separation of these texts in the war in heaven, the first portion of what will be the re-release of this information, Yeshua is the light that was called forth by the Father when he said, "Let there be light," in Genesis. And actually, I'm going to pull this up to explain it in a little bit greater detail. And you'll notice too, because it's interesting that after the light is called forth, that it says that it was good. But then when the darkness is called forth, it doesn't say the same thing. And I'll explain this in greater detail, because again, this is another one of those topics that you have to reference the extra biblical text in order to understand how it applies to what is being spoken of here in Genesis. And that each one of these verses is just jam packed with information. Even as I cover in my new book on the firmament, the difference between verse 1 and 2 in Genesis 1, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth, which was the first world age. And then in verse 2, all of a sudden, and the earth was without form and void, meaning that if you translate that with the Strong's Concordance, it means, and the primeval earth was an indistinguishable ruin, was a deserted wasteland and an indistinguishable ruin. And so something led to the earth becoming this form, and that is the war in heaven. And so here, where it says, "Let there be light," and there was light, and God saw the light that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness and called the light day, and the darkness he called night. You see where it says, "And God saw the light that it was good." This is Yeshua being called forth as the light of the world. And I explained this with many verses and many different passages in Lucifer, Father of Cain, and also in this new book that I'll release on the war in heaven, and that it was good. And then God divided the light from the darkness. This is the rebellion of Lucifer. The Lucifer and the one third of the angels that joined him, as far as the rebellion and the war in heaven. Um, and then God called the light day. Well, anyways, Yeshua is the original morning star, as it says in Revelation, and that this is the distinction. This is the difference. Whereas the Lucifer, the morning star title to him is his usurpation, basically wanting to be like the Most High. Because it was when Yeshua was called forth as the light that this is when iniquity was found in him. Because when the Son was brought forth and given dominion over the angels and the creation, as the first created angel, this is when he refused to be a servant to what is the original Morning Star administration, which is Yeshua, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And that's when he was cast out of the heavens. Or actually, that's when he was allowed to tempt the angels, and one third of them joined him in creating a war against the Father and the Son. And this war continued until the second day, and it resulted in the earth becoming destroyed. And then on the second day, after um, after this war, then the earth is recreated, reestablished, and then the firmament is put into place on the second day. And I also speak and speculate in my newest book that this was done as a means to prevent them from escaping the justice that is coming uh, to them, which with Yeshua's second coming, that's when he will assume his seat on the great white throne judgment, and then every knee shall bow and every tongue confess. So, uh,
Um, and in the new book, wasn't one of the chapters entitled "A Wasteland"? That it was a wasteland. That
right,
yeah, and so that's the meaning of
right,
the verse there. And I don't see how you. I mean, God creates perfection,
yes,
and so when we get to that point in Genesis 1:2, it is a wasteland, and
right,
so I think that warrants exploration. There
right.
was a question from Pale Rider, and this is a follow up to I think the conference they had exposing the darkness. Um, he asked, "Do you agree that Simyaza and Azazel are one and the same? Is that the same question as Lucifer and Satan being one and the same?" Anyway,
Okay, as far as Semyaza and Azazel, no, I don't believe that they are the same at all. In fact, when you read the book of Enoch, it references them as being one of the, one of the 200 main leaders of the Watchers, which fell during the time of Yared. And this was during the second incursion of the angels. And Semyaza birthed Mahe and Hiha and Mahe, the giants that are mentioned in the book of the giants from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so I don't, and also as far as Lucifer and Satan, I know that David Carrico sees them as being two separate beings, but I don't see this at all. What I see in Lucifer in Isaiah chapter 14, which actually I'll bring it up as well too. But anyways, in Isaiah chapter 14, this is a reference to Lucifer again as uh, the son of the morning, which again the Venus um, is that particular symbolism that is being portrayed in that. But anyways, it ties to this is the being that wanted to be as the Most High. He wanted to exalt his throne above the stars of God and to establish his throne above the stars and above the clouds of God, and to be as the Most High, to place his throne. He says, in the mount of the congregation, in the sides of the north, which, as I explain in my new book, the sides of the north is the very top, the very center of the vaulted dome of the earth, right above where we see Polaris positioned as the center of the celestial night. Because Polaris is the only unmoving fixed star of the celestial night, and all the other stars move in circle around it. Even the sun and the moon, all the luminaries, all the planets, everything moves in circle around Polaris. And it's interesting because I've been studying a book called the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a Hindu text which speaks about the dynamics and the shape and the orientation of the earth, and it speaks about Polaris as well in this same orientation. And that all the heavenly moon luminaries move in circle around it. It calls it Dhruva Loka, um, but it's basically the same thing. It's describing the same thing that the book of Enoch does, and I'll actually be sharing some of that research in my newest book on paradise, the sides of the north, once I get to it after the rewrite of this Lucifer book. But anyways, the one portion that I wanted to bring forth um, is this particular verse in Isaiah chapter 14, which again is the one where it says, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, who didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thy heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God, I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, and I will be like the Most High. But then the Most High God answers him and says, yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. Instead of you ascending and taking my throne, rather, I'm going to bring you down into hell and cast you into the pit, that they may see, they shall narrowly look upon thee and consider thee, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble, that did shake the kingdoms, that made the world as a wilderness and destroyed the cities thereof? That opened not the house of the prisoners. Um, what is the most interesting portion to me with regard to all this is verse 19, where it says, but thou art cast out of thy grave like an abominable branch, and as the raiment of those that are slain, thrust through with a sword that go down to the stones of the pit, as a carcass trodden under feet. Because the like an abominable branch, if you think of a tree like the family tree, then if you understand that Lucifer is also described in Ezekiel 31 as being that huge tree which all the nations and all the birds were up under, and that he was head over all of the angels. And then this particular abominable branch is actually referring to his, just like as I read in Matthew 13, that he is the enemy which snuck into the garden and that sowed the tares. He is the enemy which beguiled Eve, impregnated her with Cain, and then brought forth his own bloodline, which this is why it says, in my opinion, in verse 20, it says, thou shalt not be joined with them in burial, because thou hast destroyed thy land and slain thy people. The seed of evildoers shall never be renowned. Prepare slaughter for his children for the iniquity of their fathers, that they do not rise nor possess the land, nor fill the face of the world with cities. I'm actually going to make a video about this, but I just have not had the time. But basically, in Isaiah 14, it's telling you the same thing that Yeshua tells you in Matthew 13, that Lucifer is the abominable branch and that he is the father of the seed of the evildoers. And that Yeshua, just like, the Lord God, Yahweh Elohim, just like it says in Genesis 3:15, I will put enmity between thy seed and the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, thy sons and her sons. He's telling you the same thing here. He's going to wage war, prepare slaughter for his children, for the iniquity of their fathers, that they do not rise nor possess the land. It's the same thing. He's basically telling you he's going to war against the children of Lucifer, the seed of the serpent. Ye are of your father the devil. It's all the same thing interwoven all throughout scripture. And how people can't see this is beyond me, but these are the connections, Kathy.
Um, I wonder, those that worship Satan or Lucifer, I mean, do they have a distinction?
Say that again. I was reading the question by Pale Rider. Go ahead.
Those who follow and worship Lucifer or Satan, do they have a distinction?
Yes, in my opinion, most of them, especially at the highest level, they are the seed of the evildoers that is spoken about in that passage. They are the tares, the goats. Ye are of your father the devil, Cain, who was of that wicked one. The same thing with Paul in Second Corinthians chapter 11, verse 3, where he says that Eve was not a chaste virgin when because the serpent had beguiled her. Well, how does the serpent beguiling her and tempting her to eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil make her as far as takes her virginity? It doesn't make sense unless you understand that the act that is spoken about as being Eve eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was actually associated in sexual connotation to her having been wholly seduced, which is what the word for beguiled is in both the Greek and the Hebrew, and that it was her being wholly seduced which led to her conception of Cain. And as it says in the Targums, when you read it, her desiring the angel is what led to the conception of Cain. And then she added to bear from her husband Adam Abel. And so, it's basically um, fraternal twins from two different fathers. No, and I haven't heard that, Pale Rider, as far as that interview with Gary. So I don't know what you're talking about. And as Gary and I, we have disagreements on some things, like like um, his understanding of the Gnostic text is completely different than mine. And then as far as his, even though he's come out and said that, yeah, there might be a connection to Genesis 3 as far as Cain being a child of the serpent, he still doesn't want to go there. And he basically writes his book from the point of Genesis 6 as being the beginning of the enmity between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman, even though it's clear and it's written and linked in Genesis chapter 3. But
Something that I've noticed is people who have a resistance to, I mean, to the serpent seed, the what your work is about, or to the flat earth, they will just throw up a roadblock to it. And they have so much work that they're doing as well.
right.
It's hard unless they come out and really speak against it, then it's kind of hard to fault folks
Oh
sometimes.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, everybody. I mean, you can't study everything,
Yeah.
And then it's the same thing with flat Earth. So many people, having hesitations and reluctance to go into it, they simply won't study it, and just because either they think it's ludicrous or they don't want to know the truth about it, or they don't have the time to dedicate to looking investigating into it, whatever it is. But and of course I don't fault anybody, um, because I know that a lot of people are just busy, busy with
On a mission.
their,
I always think of
yeah,
Jonathan Kleck like that.
right.
He's on a mission, he's focused, and that's what it's
Yes.
about.
Yes,
So,
exactly. And so, I honor people for where they are. And I know that, a lot of people, in my opinion, if they really did study it like they studied other stuff, that they would then come to the truth of it as a revelation. But until they do so, I mean, you really can't, make opinion about it one way or the other. Like, if you were to ask them, many of those that don't believe it or that are deniers of it, if you ask them why, they can't really tell you. I mean, they can't go into it and, basically point by point break up the arguments that I bring forth,
no.
because they haven't studied it. And
You know
that's
how they say that Genesis 6 is the skeleton key? Well, serpent seed is the skeleton key to the skeleton key.
exactly, yes, it's the real skeleton key.
Yeah.
Genesis 6, yes, it is, one of the keys for, as far as leading into the angel wars and the birth of the giants. But again, it could not have happened without Genesis 3, the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. And so, anyways, we're gonna run out of time, so when we come back from this break, I'm gonna go ahead and start reading some of this material to share it with you so that you can get a better sense and understanding for what it is I'm talking about, and to some of the new information that I've discovered, because it's absolutely fascinating. But I'll start with this because I think I can get this in before the break. This is from Jubilees chapter 4, and it says, and Adam and his wife mourned for Abel 4 weeks of years. And in the fourth year of the fifth week they became joyful. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare him a son, and he called his name Seth, for he said, God hath raised up a second seed unto us on the earth instead of Abel, for Cain slew him. Now, if Cain were their child, Seth would be their third son. So you see that how it's, mentions Seth as their second son,
Oh,
and
yeah.
because Abel was killed. And so, yeah, that's exactly correct. Seth was their second son, and he was brought forth as a replacement for Abel because Cain slew him. And that's why Seth, his name means substitute, because he was the substitute for Abel, who was born in similitude and likeness to Adam, but not Cain. Cain was not, in similitude and likeness, to that of Adam, because he was not Adam's child. All right, we'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. For final segment of this show, just flew on by, but I did want to mention really quick, the for those of you that might be interested in supporting the network, freedomslips.com, that you can go there, click on the donate button, and if you make a donation of, I believe it's $70, that they will send you, the network will send you a 1 ounce silver eagle, or I believe it's 7 ounces of homemade beef jerky that was created by Mike's grandfather, I believe it is. I can't get access to the message right now, but off of memory, that's what I believe it was, what it had said. But if you can, please do go to freedomslips.com and, support the network with, $5, $10 donation, whatever you can afford to do, and know that we greatly appreciate you. All right, I'm gonna go into furthering some of this evidence and some of this new material. Uh, those of you that have listened to and studied my work, you know that I bring forth the Targum translations, which predate the King James version by 15. 1,500 years, and that they also are the Aramaic translations of the original Hebrew Torah. And Genesis 4:1 in that verse, in that translation, says, "And Adam knew Hava his wife, who had desired the angel, semicolon, and she conceived and bare Cain, and she said, I have acquired a man, the angel of the Lord. And she added to bear from her husband Adam his twin, even Abel." And so Eve's eating fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is what was her actually desiring the angel, and then she conceived and bare Cain as a result of her eating that fruit and her desiring the angel. And this is what led to uh, Cain. And then she added to bear, that means Adam eating the fruit, you, sharing the fruit, eating the fruit afterwards, that was him repeating the act with Eve, and that this is what led to the birth of Abel as his twin. And so there's a verse in the tradition of the Jews by Johann A. Eisenmenger who explains this verse as such. And Adam knew his wife Eve, who was pregnant by Samael, Satan, and she conceived and bare Cain. And he was like the heavenly beings and not like earthly beings. And she said, I have gotten a man from the angel of the Lord. Here's one that is of interest, and it's from the Hypostasis of the Archons, which is one of the books that came out of the Nag Hammadi codices. It says this: Now afterwards she bore Cain, their son, speaking about the Archons. And Cain cultivated the land. Thereupon he knew his wife, again becoming pregnant. She bore Abel, and Abel was a herdsman of the sheep. And so that's basically reiterating the same thing that the Targum said. Here's a passage which speaks about the differentiation of Cain from the Kebra Nagas. It says, I go up from Adam and I say, God is king in truth, for him praise is meet, and his appointed under him Adam to be king over all that he created. And he drove him out of the garden because of his apostasy through the sin of the serpent and the plotting of the devil. And at the sorrowful moment that Cain was born, and when Adam saw that the face of Cain was ill tempered or sullen, and his appearance evil, he was sad. And then Abel was born, and when Adam saw that his appearance was good and his face good tempered, he said, This is my son, the heir of my kingdom. And so you see that there was something strangely different about Cain. Now, this is a passage from the 1748 book, The Traditions of the Jews, which is fascinating. It says this. And this is stuff that you haven't heard yet, Kathy, because I just added it to the Lucifer Father of Cain book. And, I just now started sharing it. But, anyways, it says this.
What
And
was what is the text?
it's called The Tradition of the Jews,
Okay.
which in 1700, when it was first published, um, the, the, uh, I forget what his name was. But, anyways, he was the head of the emperor of this particular place where this individual, it was Germany, and he had all of the books confiscated and rounded up and burned. And for 48 years this information, was still yet undiscovered, and this guy's efforts were for naught. But then somebody had one of the banned translations and translated some of the text into English, and that's what became this book called The Tradition of the Jews. But they were trying to hide it and trying to keep it from us. But anyways, it says this, and you'll understand why when you hear some of this material. fascinating. We have already shown a tradition of the Jews that Samael lay with Eve and begot Cain. Upon this matter, we had the following passages. In the Falkut Shadash, under the title Adam, 'tis said, Eve conceived by Samael and brought forth Cain. And when she saw by his shape that he was unlike the lower creatures, and that he was of the upper creation, she said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. Again, it is said, he, Samael, lay with Eve, who conceived by his impurity, and brought forth Cain, whose shape was not like that of other men. Um, Rabbi Menkem, in his exposition on the five books of Moses, said this. And Adam knew his wife Eve, writes thus. Now then, that Cain was formed from the impurity and that drop which the serpent injected into Eve, but as it was impossible without the mixture of his seed for the spirit to clothe itself with a human body, and he brought forth into this world for the seed of Adam furnished means for the clothing it with a body. Therefore, he, namely Cain, became a murderer, as it is said, out of the serpent's root shall come forth a cockatrice, which is another interesting passage, also from Isaiah 14, verse 29, I believe. For such was the influential nature of the judgment upon him. Um, he writes, and Adam knew his wife who had conceived by the angel Samael was pregnant and bare Cain, whose resemblance was like the upper creatures, and not like the lower. And she said, I have got the man, the angel of the Lord. To the same purpose we read in the Falkut Shadash under the title Adam, also in the great Falkut Rabbini, and in several other rabbinical treatises. In the treatise Avoth of Rabbi Nathan in the Amsterdam Talmud, it is said, the serpent had an inclination to take Eve to wife. The words run thus. What had the first serpent at that time in his mind? He said within himself, I will go and murder Adam and take his wife and be king over the whole earth. I will walk with my body erect and eat of all the dainties of the world. Then said the holy and blessed God to him, Thou hast said, Thou wilt murder Adam and take Eve to wife. Therefore, I will set enmity between thee and the woman. Thou hast said, Thou wilt be king over the whole world. Thou shalt therefore be cursed above all cattle. Thou hast said, Thou wilt walk with the body erect. Therefore, upon thy belly shalt thou creep. Thou hast said, Thou wilt eat of all the dainties of the world. Therefore, dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. The tradition of the Jews, Johann A. Eisenmenger on Genesis 4:1, which, because this book is difficult to find, I'm going to publish it through Sacred Word
Oh,
Publishing at
good.
some point. Yeah. It's absolutely fascinating,
That's fascinating.
isn't it? He's going
Yeah.
to murder Eve and take, yeah, murder Adam and take Eve as his wife.
So he's also saying that he's taking on a body as clothing. I mean, to be able to accomplish these things.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, all of this is just absolutely fascinating material. And the fact that it goes back, 1700, and that it was banned and all of these books were
Oh, yeah.
burned. I
And
mean,
so, what was its source in 1700?
all these, well, some of those books that I just mentioned, these different rabbinical commentaries,
Okay.
all these different, all those books that, like the Falkut Shadash, which the Shadash, I believe it's like a Mishra, Even like the Zohar is like a midrash. Anyways, it's from all of those. Um, he's compiling and basically telling us what the Jews of the early church and what the Hebrew people going back to even the time of the Targum, because again, the Targum is also from the first century CE. It predates the King James Version by 1500 years. And in reading it, it helps you, it gives you insight into what they believe. Because the Targum is what they actually read and studied from
Right.
in the Holy Temple.
If we just placed ourselves in that time, in that era, to understand how they were learning what they understood, it's totally different than I think I see a lot of people now looking at that and saying, no, we can't take that as um knowledge or wisdom text. But then that was everything they understood.
Yeah,
So
this
I
is their truth.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I don't think people recognize that.
No, they don't. They deny it. And they call me a heretic
But
when,
it's so easy to understand. I mean,
well, yeah, when you study it and you
yeah,
actually look into it.
yeah.
And
Um,
I present so much information that it's undeniable, in my opinion.
well, and information that is, I mean, it makes so much sense. It connects so many things, like saying that Cain resembled upper creatures.
Exactly, yes. Hmm.
That's fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
Do we see something else like that in another text?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to share another one with you right now. This one is from the Legends of the Jews by a guy named Louis Ginsberg, who published it in 1909, which I'm going to publish this one as well through Sacred Word Publishing. But anyways, it says this: wickedness came into the world with the first being born of woman, Cain, the oldest son of Adam. When God bestowed paradise upon the first pair of mankind, he warned them particularly against carnal intercourse with each other. But after the fall of Eve, Satan, in the guise of the serpent, approached her, and the fruit of their union was Cain, the ancestor of all the impious generations that were rebellious towards God, and rose up against him. Cain's descent from Satan, who is the angel Samael, was revealed in his seraphic appearance. So, the seraphim angels are
Yeah.
dragon like entities. And so Cain had a seraphic appearance as well, which is interesting because that is the quotation uh, as the upper creatures. What are the upper creatures? The seraphim angels. What did they look like? They had a seraphic appearance. They looked like dragons, like the feathered serpent. So
Well,
that ties it together. Yeah. So,
that's awesome. I really like that
isn't
text.
it? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Wait till I mean, there's so much. But I'm going to continue reading from it. At his birth, the exclamation was wrung from Eve, I have gotten a man through an angel of the Lord, which, that angel was
There you go.
Samael.
Yeah.
All right, continuing. Adam was not in the company of Eve during the time of her pregnancy with Cain. After she had succumbed a second time to the temptations of Satan and permitted herself to be interrupted in her penance. This is describing a story in the first book of Adam and Eve, where both her and Adam went and stood in a river for 40 days as penance to ask the forgiveness of the Most High. But anyway, Satan went to her again and deceived her and said that he was an angel of light and that God was going to forgive her. And so she broke her prayer and she went to Adam, and then she realized that Satan had deceived her again. So, anyway, she decides to go east, and then realizes that she's pregnant with Cain. And this is what I'm about to read from. She left her husband and journeyed westward because she feared her presence might continue to bring him misery. Adam remained in the east. When the days of Eve to be delivered were fulfilled and she began to feel the pangs of travailing, she prayed to God for help, but he hearkened not unto her supplications. Who will carry the report to my lord Adam? She asked herself. Ye luminaries in the sky, I beg you, tell it to my master Adam when you return to the east. It's interesting because this text is also describing the circular motion of the luminaries above this, the face of the earth, going from east to west and then north and back to east, just like the book of Enoch. But anyways, in that selfsame hour, Adam cried out, the lamentation of Eve has pierced to my ear. Mayhap the serpent has again assaulted her. And he hastened to his wife. Finding her in grievous pain, he besought God in her behalf, and 12 angels appeared together with two heavenly powers. All these took up their post to the right and of her and to the left of her, while Michael, also standing on her right side, passed his hand over her from her face downward to her breast, and said to her, be thou blessed, Eve, for the sake of Adam. Because of his solicitations and his prayers, I was sent to grant thee our assistance. Make ready to give birth to thy child. Immediately her son was born, a radiant figure. A little while, and the babe stood upon his feet, ran off, and returned, holding in his hand a stalk of straw, which he gave to his mother. Um, Now Adam took Eve and the boy to his home in the east. God sent him various kinds of seeds by the hand of the angel Michael, and was taught how to cultivate the ground and make it yield produce and fruits to sustain himself and his family and his posterity. After a while, Eve bore her second son, whom she named Abel, because she said, he was born but to die. The slaying of Abel by Cain did not come as a wholly unexpected event to his parents. In a dream, Eve had seen the blood of Abel flow into the mouth of Cain, who drank it with avidity. Though his brother entreated him not to take all, when she told her dream to Adam, he said, lamenting, oh, that this may not portend the death of Abel at the hand of Cain. He separated the two lads, assigning to each an abode of his own, and to each he taught a different occupation. Cain became a tiller of the ground, and Abel a keeper of the sheep. It was all in vain. In spite of these precautions, Cain slew his brother. It's from chapter 2, The Legend of the Jews, by Louis Ginsburg, 1909.
Wow, that's an amazing text.
Yeah, I mean it's fascinating, and the incredible thing about both of them is they begin at the beginning of creation, and they go all through the biblical text and the biblical narrative, and they comment and add further detail and commentary on every story that is ambiguous in the King James version of the gospel.
So, was it meant to be burned, or there were other
Oh,
texts?
they burned them. They burned all of them, but somebody had salvaged and saved one, of those books, and somehow got a hold of it and published it into English in London, and that's how we got it. And it's called the Traditions of the Jews, and it came about 48 years after they thought they had basically burned all of the books that he had put out.
Wow. And you know where the inspiration for burning of the books comes from.
Right? The adversary.
Exactly. That is a wealth of information and confirmation.
Oh, I know. I mean, just those two sources. And so you can see why I decided to rewrite, um,
Oh,
Lucifer,
yes.
father of Cain, and to add all this
Wow.
information.
Oh,
And
I
this is
can't. Oh,
just some
yeah.
of it. I mean, this is just some of it.
I
And
just wanted the flat earth stuff fixed.
right, you're
But
right.
this, wow, even more. It's amazing how everything comes together.
Right, and these two books also speak about the flat Earth and the vaulted dome of the Earth in great detail in them. I
Well,
mean,
like you
they're
mentioned
fascinating.
with the rotation of the luminaries. I mean, those are things that we might have skipped over in the text.
Exactly right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, we wouldn't have even recognized it, but now that we have this discernment and such revelation, looking back at all of these texts, they read entirely different and new. And insight is all being brought forth again for new reconsideration.
And that's true in the Bible too. People don't understand and use just one verse, Isaiah 40:22, and that even in itself is not a good verse for
It
that
actually,
purpose. I
goes against their purpose and
exactly.
affirms our purpose.
And it's everywhere within the text when you read with new eyes. I mean, even if you just read with old eyes, you should see
Right,
it.
right.
So
Yeah, I mean, you even like the story of Joshua, with the sun standing still and the sun and the moon standing still, and how the scriptures say that the earth is unmoving. I mean,
the
all
church
of
has
those
tried
things.
to the church has tried to be a part of the world for too long, and we accept that and try and mesh. It's like saying, well, my God is big enough to make all the universe, all these worlds, and but see, that's not in the text.
Right.
And I think that that's a problem, and that's where what has been the fruit of that is the majority of people in the world are very easily brought into the lie of science and scientism, and they don't they and so that they completely disregard the scriptures.
Yes, they absolutely do. And I agree with you, Piney. He says, she, I'm not sure, overwhelming evidence, and I fully agree. And Pale Rider says, hijacker was wronged, and I fully agree with that as well. If it wasn't for the jacker, and I give him props in both of my books, the Flat Earth is Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, and also the Firmament. I mentioned him in the acknowledgments that if it wasn't for him and his insistence, and basically harassing me to investigate it, I wouldn't have come to the revelation and have been able to present this information to all of you for reconsideration. And so, props and much thanks and gratitude to the Jacker. God bless all. We
God
appreciate
bless you.
you and
Thank you,
love
Zen.
you. Thank you, sister. Always a pleasure to hang
All
tight
right,
with
good
you.
night, everybody.
Good night, all. God bless. Shalom.
When you think about Satan, I mean, wouldn't you expect that he would be behind such evil that really has been the launch pad to ramp up, all of these last days events that
Right.
began, like you say, with the fig tree generation? I'm not sure exactly when you time that, but we are that last generation. And so, what a perfect, I mean, it just makes so much sense. I know myself, I was really reluctant to look at that. And I noticed because John Baptist on the Tribulation Now, he had a 9/11 thing on his website. It was just, I was learning so many other things, but I kept, like saying, no, I don't want to look at that. I don't want,
Hmm.
I know it's going to be true with everything else I'm learning. But then, I finally did. And lately, it's been interesting to me to analyze what my mindset was during that decade when, Bush and all that. I was completely buying into what the Fox News, you know, um, manipulation in the media was. I mean,
Hmm.
this is how you think of it. This isn't how you think of it. I remember thinking, I think I saw small change or loose change being promoted on one of the left wing sites. So because it was being promoted by left wing, that's where I put it in that bucket. And it's
Hmm.
it's really a subconscious thing that we do. But I thought, Rumsfeld was good. I thought George W. was good. You get in that, and I see that in others, who I know that that's what they do is what I used to do. But now, seeing what's happening in Syria and the sources that I use that really go in and tear it apart, and then you see it confirmed, like the propaganda that the Pentagon admitted to just in the last week, $500 million that we paid to for ISIS propaganda. And I saw one of my I'm not going to mention her. I love her to death. A conservative Islamic focused websites taking that story and spinning it. I mean, having the actual story, but spinning it in favor of the U.S. I was appalled at
Hmm.
that, but that's where I was, and now I've learned that we got to get to the truth of these things. And bottom line, at that point in time, I mean, that's where it's coming from. It's coming from the adversary, and it's for a purpose. And you can see all of these things that come forth out of it. The thing that woke me up to really start doing things different and looking at things different was the financial collapse in 2008. It's probably because of
Hmm.
my background as
Right.
an accountant and tax preparer, and knowing all of that is just so useless. And I remember thinking back, I had someone, I caught up his taxes. That, like, well, you talked about the Sacred Word Publishing last week, and I want to listen to that show. I've downloaded it to listen to tomorrow. I try and incorporate things to listen to and learn from while I do other tasks. It's just so much. There's such a
Hmm.
wealth of stuff, and then everything that's going on in the world right now. So anyway, I was kind of overwhelmed last week, and I just kind of shut down.
Hmm.
So trying to avoid that.
That's it's necessary, and I did the same thing when I first came to awakening, and back then it was all the focus on, 9/11, government-sponsored terror, and learning about how you can't trust doctors or government or anybody, even your teachers and educators, and our parents and grandparents, everybody basically taught us lies just because they were indoctrinated into the same matrix and same belief system. And so just learning that everything was based upon deception, I mean, it's a heavy thing. And then trying to filter and discern, because you're really having to reestablish and build up a paradigm and replace the old belief systems. And that is a heavy task. I mean, having to um, substitute all you thought you knew of truth with new information and to assimilate all that and then throw, you know, on top of that, the New World Order, the Illuminati, and the seed of Cain working from the shadows to perpetuate the New World Order and world government, the collapse of the financial system, and all of that, and how it all aligns with biblical prophecy. All that is just so heavy. So I had to learn, a long time ago to basically balance it and to learn to um, do things that I love to do, which brought me joy, but also would ease some of the heaviness and balance it with light, balance
L-
the darkness with light.
Let me ask you, what was it initially that woke you up to, the world was not what you had believed and been taught?
Well, when I began to examine the 9/11, because it had a very deeply profound effect on me. I remember awakening the morning, and in my third book, A Different Way of Being, there's a whole series of poems which speak about this. Because at that time I was a columnist and I wrote for magazines, and so I wrote like, usually I wrote like 2,000 to 3,500 words, and I ended up writing like several, like 13.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat, and with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is likened to a man which sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat, and went his way. But when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, didst not thou sow good seed in thy field? From whence then hath it tares? He said unto them, An enemy hath done this. The servants said unto him, Wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? But he said, Nay, lest while ye gather up the tares, ye root up also the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And in the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, Gather ye together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen, and I have as co host with me this evening Kathy Dunson. Kathy, are you there, sister?
I am. Good evening, everybody.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining me. Just wanted to let everybody know that Kathy's gonna take it over from here, and I'm just gonna I'm just gonna ride shotgun and comment here and there.
Okay,
um,
that's fine.
I'm teasing. Um, but how are you doing? Everything's good. You're feeling good, and life is good, and
Yeah.
good.
It's just it gets overwhelming at
Yes.
times.
Mm.
The things that we do and follow and pay attention to, and I really try and stay aware to share things. And
1,000, and they broke it up into different sections and published it all. But in writing all of that and just recognizing that the world has changed and that we can never go back to, the way things were before the events of that day, and then investigating it, wanting to know more, and wanting to learn as much as I could about that event, because that was the turning point for our generation as far as the the instituting the Patriot Act, the
yeah,
war of and on terror, and then the wars of in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places, and then the indiscriminate bombing and of peoples, as far as things like the drones and assassinations and all that. I mean, they basically took the gloves off. Then we got involved in torture, the loss of habeas corpus rights, the whole military tribunal system as an alternate justice system, and then the thing with being able to label an American citizen. If you just put the domestic terrorist label on them, you can then torture them, hold them indefinitely, no right to jury, no right to a speedy trial, none of that. And so in studying and looking to all of that, then I was basically led to understand that 9/11 was an inside job and that there was an aspect to it that was not being conveyed truthfully on the mainstream media. And then also learning that basically the mainstream media was just another arm of the same shadowy um, government and figures that had perpetuated the events of that day. Just all of that, led me to more and more and more, and just going further and further down the rabbit hole, and then one thing after the other, after the other, after the other, and I was already involved with the study of scripture and writing about the seed of Cain, the fallen angels, and the giants, but that event brought the whole world to conspiracy and the whole clandestine black ops and what they're doing behind the scenes as far as the new world order, how it all connects with the central banking, the Federal Reserve System, the deficit spending, all of that. It For me, it merged my biblical
Exactly.
and prophetic
Yeah.
side with the conspiratorial
Yeah, I think
side.
that's really important. People, Christians, most Christians today, excuse me, the mainstream church, they won't look at that. Most of them are just oblivious to it, but it makes such sense. Eons ago, he was a tax protester and thinking, "Oh, you're just silly," but not looking into what he did.
Right.
And now, I learned unconstitutional,
Right.
it's
Yes.
slavery. I
Hmm.
tried to explain that, to someone the other day and just, like water off a duck,
Right.
not gonna take it in. And that's, where I was in so many things. But that event got me thinking that, no, this isn't right. And so then I really started to open up. So it's any one of, you know, a multitude, a multiple of events that can wake someone up. And that's why, I think that we on Facebook and places that we try and share information, I try and share just all kinds of stuff because you never know when you're going to get through. And at the bottom of all of these, it's Satan.
Right. And you never know what's going to be the catalyst for a certain individual as to bringing them, the domino that knocks down all the other dominoes and that brings them to full understanding. And so, yeah, that's all we can do is plant seeds. But I just want to give a shout out to Dharma and Piney and Beeblebrox and Link and Pale Rider, Mr. Rowe. Kathy's with me, Simply Tribal, um, and all the rest of you, Frenda, Flat Earth Kitty, that are all Monster, Zippy, Zipster, Seajoy, everybody that's in the chat room. Know that we appreciate all of you, Mitchell, Cher, and everybody else that's not in the immediate scroll. And thank you, Piney, for your commentary as far as the different endeavors that we're involved in and all that we've got going on. There's a lot of things, and I'm so excited about all of them and being able to do what we're going to be able to do. As far as those of you that if you missed the last show where I talked about um, Sacred Word Publishing and also the nonprofit that we will have married to it, Endeavor Freedom, which will be through that nonprofit able to do the real work. I mean, not that, sharing information and sharing truth and helping others to awaken isn't the real work, but I know all of us in our heart, we want to directly help as far as feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, taking care of the homeless, the orphan, the widowed, battered mothers, veterans. That's where, if all of us could, to be able to help out and to be directly involved with sharing charity and kindness and compassion, that most certainly all of us would want to do that with our time.